I'm Carol Mikett. And for you, those of you who have never been here before, this program looks at the way in which St. Petersburg shapes who it is, what the identity is of a city. And the program's starting to be more about any city. How does a city shape who it is, what it is, and how do people regard it? St. Pete's a really interesting place, and we've looked at how the outdoors shapes the city, how the architecture and urban planning shapes the city. We've looked at art, we've looked at sports, we've looked at many, many different things. But one thing we haven't looked at, which sort of surprised me when I looked back at what I had done, was we haven't looked at how the government of a place shapes a city. And we haven't looked at how people who don't normally have a voice shape a city. So Beth Houghton and Scott Wagman are experts on that. So, so as you know, Scott Wagman ran for mayor. He did not win, but I have to say I did vote for him in the primary.
4,000 more and I would add it.
If if everyone who said they voted for Scott had really voted for Scott, he would be mayor. I just wanted to say.
So I thought he would be a perfect person to talk about how the structure of a city government works, because he had to really learn about that, and he got to interact with a lot of people. But he also doesn't have a political position, so he doesn't have to guard what he says.
He has never guarded what he said.
And then Beth, as I guess most of you know, is the
executive
director of the Free Clinic. So her people that she sees all the time are people who don't usually have a voice. And one of the things that's very interesting also, and why I was so grateful to have both of them, is one of the main issues that's going on now in our presidential race and in our conversations about how we want our communities and our country to be, is how is it that the government interacts with people who, and agencies, social service agencies. How do we fund those things? How do we even think about that? So this is a perfect opportunity to talk about that relationship. How does government work with individual citizens and help provide for them in which ways they do? So I'm grateful you're here. And I think I'm going to start, I'm going to start the way I always start. If you would tell me how you came to St. Petersburg.
You want to tell the story first? We'll see if they match up.
You fill in the, you were a part of the conspiracy that got us to St.
Maybe I should say, one thing, maybe all of you know that they're married. So it's sort of
if that wasn't already obvious.
Really? Okay.
Well, or do you want me to start with how I got to Florida? Scott grew up by and large in Sarasota, and I grew up in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We both went to school at Tulane, I at Newcomb and him at Tulane, and then I stayed another few years to get a graduate degree there. So when we decided to get married, he had already come back to Sarasota and was working in his family's paint business. And so I moved. I could be wherever, and he had a business he had joined. So I moved at that point to Sarasota and began law school at Stetson. We lived at various places, kind of splitting the difference of the drive. We moved to Bradenton first as I was driving to Stetson and he was driving down to Sarasota. This is before I-75, and it's before the Skyway Bridge fell. That was the week that our first child was born and the week that I graduated from Stetson. So we had a long drive around when they weren't sure about the other span. In any case, we kept creeping forward, and when that child, who is now 32, became 2 and 3 years old, we weren't in a neighborhood. There weren't we were in Teresita, which is a lovely place to live, but
Where's
not.
Teresita?
See, Teresita is just south of the Skyway Bridge, and has a lot of lovely things about it, but it doesn't really, there's not a lot of there. And we wanted to be where there were things going on, and certainly there were friends for our son and a place to grow up. And so I was working in Tampa at the time. Scott was working in Sarasota. South St. Pete sounded like a great idea. So we moved to the Pink Streets in St. Pete. And then I promptly started working in St. Petersburg. And so I had a 10-minute drive, and he had a 50-minute drive.
Well,
so that's the hoodwinking part.
If I can interrupt there, Beth is very strategic, and that is, she hoodwinked me into saying, well, I'm in Tampa, you're in Sarasota, so St. Pete is midway. And then after a short period of time, we were in South St. Pete in the Pink Streets, a wonderful neighborhood, by the way. And then she promptly left Arthur Anderson, where she was a CPA, and actually joined with Marianne Riley in opening up the first St. Pete office for Arthur Anderson. Left, and less than, how many weeks before you went to All Children's?
No, we were in St. Pete for a couple of years in that office.
Yeah, but I was still driving to Sarasota,
Oh, yeah,
and then she moved like an 8-minute drive, and I'm still driving to Sarasota, and that took me 18 years to figure out that was not a real smart thing to do. So she hoodwinked me on that, but she was very strategic especially when she asked me to marry her.
So
that was a good
I
move.
said yes.
Well, actually, you said, really? Why?
So how is it that you met?
The truth?
Yes, we want the truth. We only get the truth.
I ran into her in the second floor of the UC at Tulane. A mutual friend said we need
what?
to meet. The University Center.
Oh.
Excuse me, I'm
Who knows
using
what they're
lingo.
called.
And Gregory Wilson back there, so he sort of knows those things. We met Gregory was at Tulane too, and helped lead. If I talked to him before, he helped me become president of the student body at Tulane, which then, technically, Gregory, I guess you had some role in me meeting this young lady.
That's
because
true.
it was through student government we met, and she just looked
You
absolutely.
were the president, and you were.
Actually,
community activist.
this is kind of classic to the way we continue to develop. I was on the board of what was called Cactus, Community Action Council of Tulane University Students. It was a volunteer organization that placed students out in the community, and I headed up a tutoring project in a local middle school. And next door to that office was the student government office where Scott was. And I was also involved in the Newcomb Senate. But we really met because I was doing what I've now returned to do, dealing with social service, and Scott was playing around with government, which he comes back and does.
Playing around.
When you're a student, student
so
body president.
Were you asking him for money, or were you asking him?
Actually, the faculty member who was the advisor to the volunteer organization knew Scott and knew me, and said, you ought to meet that. Scott went, yeah, you ought to meet, Beth. I think you'd enjoy each other.
So where was your first date?
Well, the important thing is the first yes or no was I saw her in this hallway. We met, and she was just wearing this really tight sweater, and she was gorgeous. And I just said, because this was the hippie time. People really looked weird. Gregory has pictures.
That's true.
And
so did you have long hair?
It was out there actually, and so it was pretty ugly. So no, we just hit it off very, very quickly. Our first date was pretty much me listening to her lead the Tulane Women's Forum at a dormitory lobby, and just sort of hung around and listened, and then kept chatting with her when everyone was gone. It was probably midnight or 1 in the morning.
And he offered to drive me home, and it was 2 blocks away. So I kind of knew something.
So how long after you met did you get married?
About 3 years.
Emotionally or really?
We lived in the same town for 6 months, and then he moved back to Sarasota.
Oh.
I went to France for a year, so we wrote. for most of that year. And then I went back to Tulane and finished my MBA, and that was another year and a half. So we really were only in the same town for 6 months, but we knew. What can I say? I think we both knew.
Stars were aligned.
So you come here to St. Pete because you
Hoodwinked,
win.
yeah.
And you stay. So you didn't move back to Sarasota or any place else. So what is it about St. Pete that got you to stay?
I think we did have opportunities to live someplace else, and when I left a job in Tampa, I knew I wanted to work in St. Pete. There's something just very accessible about St. Petersburg. As someone who wasn't from here, I could be involved in whatever, and if you joined the chamber or you joined a museum board, if you were willing to work and be a part of things and give something of yourself and give some treasure as well, you could be part of things. You could be part of what was going on. And we loved that. We really loved raising our kids in the pink streets. We were down literally at the end of, the end of the line, and so we were looking out on Tampa Bay. But it also meant that cars were not barreling through, going anywhere else, because we were essentially at a dead end. And our kids played out in the neighborhood and could, go from house to house and that sort of thing. Kind of a Leave It to Beaver sort of environment.
Leave It to Beaver. Yeah.
That we really enjoyed. So we enjoyed raising our kids here as well.
Since you grew up in Sarasota and you went back there, how do you see Sarasota and St. Pete comparing?
A lot of people do compare Sarasota and St. Pete for the arts and cultural side of it. Having lived in Sarasota from like age 7 through college, I wouldn't go back to Sarasota for anything. Partly because its urban design, its urban layout isn't nearly as good as St. Petersburg. I lived on Siesta Key, which is one of the world's best beaches. True, that was my bus stop going to school. And sometimes I would miss, we'd be on the beach and there goes the bus. And then eventually I was driving, so it was no problem. The issue there is traffic is horrible. It was never planned well. You can't go, I could beat from St. Petersburg, Florida, I could beat my father who lived on Siesta Key to Scott Paint, which is in East Sarasota, if we both left at the same time. Sarasota has huge urban planning traffic issues. The people who live on Longboat, Lido, and the Keys tend to stay in those areas, but then the cultural hub of downtown Sarasota is really cool. But I've lived in both, and I still go back to Sarasota for business reasons. This town has a flow, has a structure, has an ease of getting to know people that Sarasota cannot touch.
I think that's very interesting because I've certainly discovered that moving here, you can get very involved and welcomed into all sorts of things. So what you're saying is you don't quite have that in Sarasota.
There are some very well-off, there's the moneyed crowd, there's the politically engaged crowd, there's a lot of, I'd call it almost legacy offices where sons and daughters run after their parents run for office. They develop people like Vern Buchanan and just all sorts of nightmare political issues. There's more, I would call it, equality and egalitarianism in St. Petersburg. You don't have to have a pedigree. You don't have to come from certain schools or backgrounds. Getting involved in this town is extremely easy, and I'm saying that more globally than just Sarasota. Right. Sarasota is a lovely place to visit and go to. The Ringling, we were talking about Ringling School of Art, the school. But it's an expensive town, doesn't have the diversity that we have, and so I'm sold on St. Pete.
Woo! So you decided to run for mayor. So,
oh yeah.
I mean, that's a very big decision. And how did you come to make that decision to be the person that would run the town?
There were several steps there, and I'd say 3 or 4 of the best decisions that I made in my life. Number 1, I selected my parents very, very well. That was a good decision. Second was accepting Beth's proposal. Marrying the right spouse is very critical anywhere. That's your partner for life. Some people, multiple partners for life, but with me it's one. Selling Scott Paint, the company that I joined with my dad, and then growing it and deciding there was a point where we were skiing at one point and said, it's the end of the road. It's my life. At that stage, it was about business, making money, not having the time to devote to family and social service community activities, that it was time to get out. And also, there's some economic issues. You saw, hey, things are pretty good. It's time to go. The other decision was to get more deeply involved in the city of St. Petersburg. We had been involved in some charities like American Stage Theater, Great Explorations, Ronald McDonald House, several other things, All Children's Hospital. We were very involved in, but I was still going to Sarasota. So one decision was I needed to divorce myself from Sarasota. After that was done, what do you do? I looked at how St. Pete has been run. I enjoyed very much when I was president of the student body at a college. That sounds like, okay, that's pretty facile. But on the other hand, it is a training ground of having to deal with people. I saw what was going on here diversity-wise. When I was 17, I was elected chair of the City of Sarasota Biracial Council. Understanding race relations, even back in high school, was a big thing. It was desegregation time. It was kind of a tough period. So I'd say one best decision I made was to run for the mayorship of St. Petersburg. Losing didn't diminish that at all. I was able to meet tons of people, including many in this audience, that really fired up my vision for St. Petersburg and my passion for it even more. It's almost kind of fun that I don't have to work as many hours as Bill Foster does, and I don't get written up nastily in the paper as he does, and yet I can still have a lot of effect. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little.
And what did you think about Scott entering into public life where he would be examined so critically?
Well, it's probably amazing to his friends from high school and college that he didn't do it before he did. And I think the fact that we lived in St. Pete and he worked in Sarasota made that really difficult. And once his life was consolidated here in St. Pete, it was easier. So it didn't come as a surprise that he would want to become politically involved. Campaigning wouldn't be something I would personally enjoy a great deal, but I knew that he would. And I also knew that he's got a very thick skin. He knew that people would say bad things about him, and I knew that he might be upset about it for a day at most, and then it would go. It's just his nature. So he's really well suited for that environment. We're talking about the mayor of St. Pete. We're not talking about the president of the United States here. So we're not talking about lots of... Oh, man. What I was going to say was, the family involvement and the effect on the family is not that tremendous. And there have been a number of mayors in St. Pete whose wives were raising kids or were otherwise busy. He didn't attend everything that the mayor went to, and their lives were not turned upside down. So from a selfish perspective, I wasn't concerned about that.
During the primary, when Scott was running, I went to lots of the mayor debates because I couldn't figure out who to vote for. I didn't like any of them. So I figured if I went to enough of these debates, I'd be convinced. And I wanted to vote for Scott. But I have to say, and he knows this, he kept putting me off. Not personally, but the way he would speak, some of the things he would say, I'd say to my husband, Robert, I just can't vote for him. So we had a personal discussion, and I really commend him. You came to our home, you stayed there for a number of hours, and we really talked together. But one of the things I think was the issue is that you were used to being a CEO of this company, and you were used to, this is what I'm going to do, this is how it's going to be. And I would keep thinking, he's going to be the mayor. You can't just go in and say, this is the way it's going to be. So how would that work? So my question to you is, when you were running for mayor, What did you learn about the difference between being the CEO of Scott Payne and having to be a public figure like the mayor?
Americans like decisiveness, but on the other hand, they don't sometimes like the decisions that decisive people make. What partly hurt, and that I did learn, what's the lesson, the takeaway, is that you can't be as transparent and as open and as upfront with your decisions. Like when Paul...
If you want to win.
If you want to win. Now, you can keep it in your mind, talk to your inner circle, but what was very striking was my position on Police Chief Chuck Harmon, when I believe that people want to know what you're going to do. So Scott, in Tiger Bay in debates, what are you going to do about crime and policing? And I said, first, Chuck Harmon is a wonderful man. I know Chuck, he is a wonderful man, but he's not the man I would want to lead crime fighting in St. Petersburg, and I would find an urban experience, I'm sounding campaigning here, someone, an executive who is more attuned to what I think we need to do here, so I would replace him.
Wow.
On one hand, people like the idea that you're decisive, but when you personalize it, you're going to terminate someone's job who's a good guy. Some people might not take that. They take it as brash, a little bit too non-diplomatic. And then when Paul Tash looked at me in the eye in the editorial board interview and said, what about Go Davis? Last question, what about Go Davis? And I said, I didn't blink. I knew what I was going to do, and I told the truth. He's a wonderful, iconic gentleman, accomplished much in this city, and his time in St. Petersburg is pretty much up. And so I would go in a different direction. That was about as diplomatic as I was going to be. The next day, the article was Wagman to fire Go Davis.
I remember that article.
Now,
Which Mayor Foster eventually did.
Well, and after I lost, Bill Foster and I became friends. I said, Bill, you need to do something about Go. And unfortunately, I have a rule about employees. I had 150 of them at Scott Payne. And that is when you have a problem situation, you can either make the decision and fix it. This is the difference between CEO and politics. You need to solve the problem now, or the problem person is going to do it for you at the worst possible time. So I've always decided I need, through hard experience, I'll make the call, take the flack, and you move on. What I found is most of your subordinates applaud you later and say, we were waiting for that to happen. Thank God it finally happened. Or usually they're too late and the person quits. And
they say, oh, you don't know the half of it.
The termites come out of the woodwork.
There are all these other problems.
And the Go Davis thing, Go is a tremendous man. But there was just, we needed to go in a different direction, and then look what, I knew he was not going to cooperate with anyone but Rick Baker. When Rick left, that was it for him, and as Bill learned, Go called his own shot, much to the chagrin of a lot of people. It was just a very messy time. So the lesson to learn really is you don't have to lie, but you don't have to be as open as I was in stating exactly what all those plans were. In business, employees need to know where you're going. I was very fortunate, I never did any layoffs, never had to. I would selectively terminate people if it didn't work out well. So that's, I think, the big takeaway, Carol, is honesty is always important. You can't lie, you don't deceive, but don't come out and be as open as I was.
But as a mayor, and this goes to the structure of the city, can a mayor just make any decision he or she wants and have that occur?
We are a strong mayor system in St. Petersburg, which, by the way, if it wasn't that system, I would not have run. The old system where you're just one of the council and they're all in favor, aye, all opposed, nay, no, that's not me. Through administrative fiat, a lot of rulemaking, the mayor has a lot of power. The council, through our charter, does do the budget. The mayor presents it, the council can carve it up, chop it up, do all sorts of things. The mayor has line item ability to change. So the mayor here has a lot of power within the constraints of the budget.
And a lot of responsibility to use that authority wisely.
So this issue that I mentioned at the beginning, how does the mayor and the city council shape the nature of our town?
Or not shape it.
Or not shape it, yeah.
Well, the one thing, and I don't mean this to be in a critical way, but the first and foremost thing of the leader of the town is to present a vision for what this town should be in the future, how it should look, where are we going. I think our present administration pretty much views it as an administrative task job. We have to see that the the buses keep, well, it's wrong, it's PSTA. The police are on the ground, that the trash is picked up, and the parking meters work. There's no grand vision. Yet this is a city that just has some tremendous potential for vision. With the city council, the only difference I would say there is city council can be your friend or it can be your enemy. You really have to apply, and I think Barack Obama, in a way, with Congress is learning, I'm not sure he's learned it, he's not forged those relationships that are critical. It's still people to people. You need to really woo city council, and there's not a lot of wooing going on. I know all the city council members, we talk, there's been a breakdown on how that works. So city council and mayor should work in lockstep, should be on the same page. There'll be dissent, there'll be things that disagree on. The whole situation with the raise absolutely begs for a mayor to put forth a vision. Now, and Bill does have a vision. You're going to stay here. You're going to honor the contract, and we don't really care whether it works or not. That's the way it is. I would say it's viable but short-sighted. Long run, that policy is not going to work. City council needs to be a part of the creation of a policy that would work. There's probably 30 or 40 people within this community that you need to sit down with, sort of a kitchen cabinet, and hash out ideas. Find out, pull in some councilmen. There's sunshine laws, which you have to obey. But there's a lot can be done behind the scenes to ferret out several policies, mold them into something that's workable, and then come out publicly for it.
So if you had an ideal St. Petersburg where the mayor and the city council really got along and there was a vision, how would that then affect the rest of us? I mean, would it shape the way the city was or is?
Well, the number one issue on that level is budget. If city council and the administration work together, were in harmony, and provided a vision for this city, they might have a chance of convincing the public that maybe, just maybe, a property tax increase might be viable and in their interest in the future. Right now, the Tea Party side is tax increases, forget it, never going to happen. I'm not saying right now that I'm for a tax increase or not, but you can squeeze so much expense out of this administration, then decisions have to be made. So informing what we make this city become, first, if they're in harmony, you can come to agreement how you're going to fund it. You know, personally, my own view, we overfund fire EMS and we underfund police. Crime drive, Midtown, there's a fix to the problems in Midtown. Crime and insecurity is a huge problem in Midtown. If city council, I've been a proponent for many years, you might be aware of this Midtown police substation idea.
And you just had a letter in the paper about it.
Yeah, I'm surprised they printed it, but $1 million, you could have a substation on land they already own. Council and mayor aren't even talking about this kind of thing. If they got that way, what's going to happen when property values continue to drift downward? The budget, I mean, Bill Foster walked into an absolute cauldron of disaster financially, any mayor who took over, and I was willing to do that. I knew walking in, it's going to be a disaster. They're not going to write love letters to how brilliant you are when you have to cut and slice and dice things out of the budget. But unless they're on the same page, good things can't happen. And looking at this budget, and I would say I suspect at some point a slight tax increase, not a fire fee, not nickel and diming different things, is probably going to be on the docket. But if these guys aren't on the same page, it's never going to happen. That stalls a lot of things. The other thing would be we have to understand what we are in economic development. People want, the city right now is going after huge companies, 500 employee, 1,000 employee. That is not St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is a lifestyle, quality of life, cultural community. Could be Peter Kageyama. I don't know if any of you have read For the Love of Cities. It's a great book. We have an opportunity to be an intellectual magnet with all of the educational things we've got going with Eckerd, USF, St. Pete College, tons of things. My view is if we start economically development-wise, chasing companies between 30 and 100 employees, 150 maybe, you go after the CEOs and get them to look at Beach Drive, look at the beaches. It's not all about downtown. There's more than just downtown in this area. That's another problem. These people can start to come down. They'll look at this lifestyle, Albert Whitted, St. Pete, Clearwater, transportation, other than buses and high-speed rail and low-speed and light rail, We have a pretty good transportation situation in St. Petersburg. Get them to move down here. All of a sudden, it's happening. We just don't see much of it. 25, 35, 40 employee companies coming down here. That's what will fund the future. It will fund nonprofits, that you find your donors that will put forth some things. We've become friendly with Mindy Grossman of HSN. There's what a dynamo. They were on Bloomberg. She and Neil were on Bloomberg TV. They're hilarious people. If there's about 10 CEO types that you could sit down and say, we need help to build an economic powerhouse here. What are your ideas? How would you do it? Can you reach out to your people? It's not happening. There's just not an appreciation for that level of economic development. It's let's go fish for a big one and do the Dome Industrial District, which is, without crime control, is not going to gel.
So the way you're speaking about this, it really sounds as if the government, the mayor, city council, and all the things they all can do, can really help shape a city and shape St. Pete. But then on the other hand, we have private citizens. We have people like you and Scott who help shape the city in terms of the way in which you engage with different organizations, people who run companies, just all individuals. So one of the things that I always found very interesting is how the government people help shape the city, but then how private citizens, and especially private citizens that have needs to be on boards and direct things. Now, both of you are in that category. You both are on boards. You both influence a lot of things. So how does the individual then do things to shape a city that a government doesn't do? Or can you step over the government?
The city has stepped over the government, I think. A lot of the exciting things that have gone on, a lot of things we talked about, the attributes that we like, have happened, I won't say in spite of the government, but without a whole lot of government support. The arts would be a good example of that. The city really doesn't do a great deal to support the arts, and yet it's a vibrant arts community. The city doesn't do much of anything relative to health care, but we have Johns Hopkins and All Children's here in our midst. That's all private. I mean, that's all been private money and private leadership to make that happen.
And it's so prominent. I mean, it's this whole area of St. Pete, and you see it. I mean, when you come here and it's like, wow. I mean, that really influences the shape of our city.
Absolutely. You have one of the best examples related
right
to
here.
Dali. Yeah.
Well, I'll take off in a couple of areas here because this is my role model in a lot of the things that I've learned how to. She jumped into social service and community service before I did. What Beth's alluding to is the Dali Museum is here because one man, a sole practitioner attorney, Jim Martin, saw an article in the Wall Street Journal saying that this Mr. Morris of Cleveland has this huge collection of Dalis and he can't find a home. Nobody wants it. And he sort of and this is going to segue into how an individual can get involved. He just said, wow, why can't we do that? And that's instead of why, it's why not. And then he started to reach out to people, and that ball started rolling. That culminated with the Dali Museum at the old building.
And it was not that he had some huge amount of money that he wrote a single check to make it happen. No. Yes, he has some means, and yes, he reached out to other people of means, but a lot of it was just having the vision and being willing to go sell the vision to other people, and a lot of hard work.
Then there's, when I was mentioning Beth is one of my role models, then individuals get involved in some things. You join some boards. I was on the board of American Stage, a quick story. David Brett called me one day and said, I was not involved, we were subscribers, we loved the theater, said, Scott, we need to paint the building. We don't have any money, could you donate that? And I said, sure, Dave, what do you need? It came 100 gallons of paint, which is now the Scene Club, which I'm sure you all go to.
With the same paint job,
The paint
by the
is
way.
now probably 12, 14 years old. It's looking great. And then we're talking. He said, well, why don't you join the board? Join the board. And I went through a period there of great turmoil and turnover, having to change some things. And then I left the board because I kept to make 12 noon meetings, rushing up from Sarasota or Fort Myers and then coming out, I get off. And then Beth got involved in Great Explorations. That was before that, actually. And
by the way, we really need to say, David Brett has personally cost us some serious money.
he gets on boards and he asks for help, and we say yes.
Asking Scott to become involved with American Stage. But David's a good example of somebody who reached out to Scott and got him involved in American Stage, and reached out to me when I was in my 30s probably, to get involved on the board of Great Explorations. And I think we've each made a significant impact in one or the other of those organizations.
David was a real estate developer, part of a team, not terribly wealthy, lives in Placido Bayou, man of means, but not a Huff, not a James. And he reached out and asked. And a couple of people, we were not in a certain level back then,
right,
but we were able to do what we could do. I gave away a lot of paint. That's what I could do. Some people, as they reach a certain level, like the Huffs, could write a lot of checks. Then as that went on, Beth, not only, I would say that you can give of your treasure and you can give of your time, her expertise, I know you hate it when I say this thing, but she really, All Children's Hospital was at almost no endowment, no funding. Denny Sexton was doing a tremendous job of building that up, and then she became CFO, and through a team effort, you left with how many, 150 million in funds, endowment?
Yeah. And I don't want to know where it is now, but...
Yeah, from almost zero to 150 million, and she was an operative. She was not the CEO, just a CFO that touched a lot of people. Then, I'm just trying to think.
And I would want to say, I didn't make that happen. I mean, no...
You were part of a team.
But I didn't make that happen. You know,
well,
but a group of people worked together, and I was really privileged to be part of it.
When people were confident that the stewardship of the funds was good, they were more willing to give. Then Great Explorations, I mean, that place went in the dumpster. I won't go through the long story, but then she got involved with the board. Some things happened through some major donor operations. It's now doing quite well. Lisa Negrini, the CEO, our new CEO of a year and 3 months, is back there. I mean, all nonprofits go through horrible management turmoil. Sooner or later, you get a dud and something goes wrong. The economy doesn't help, and still, the economy still is miserable. But Lisa's just a new leader, has galvanized new people. We've got a refreshed board. Good things are happening at Great Explorations of the Children's Museum. But then Eckerd College. Beth was a board member, but her financial expertise was critical to some things when Eckerd College went through. I mean, it's not publicized, people don't see it, but she was integral with the team effort that saved Eckerd College. Is that fair? Is that better?
Let's just say Miles Collier wrote a really big check, and I spent a whole lot of hours.
Yeah. Treasure of time, or treasure. And there's other instances where there's some people that are not wealthy that have stepped up and said, we need to do something differently. I'm sure all of them, CASA, Park, you name just gazillions, the Free Clinic. There's just so many charities that have had the benefit of a team of people. Some write checks of $100, $1,000. Some put in umpteen hours. I think I saw Mary Lou Boudreau's back here somewhere, I think, right? Is it? And, you know, a lot of time with the Battle of the Mines.
Sandy Averett, somebody else.
And Sandy Averett and Dick Averett building health clinics in Honduras, going down there. No, Dick wasn't hurt in Honduras, but anyway. Yeah. He was kicking someone asking for money. No, and Mary Lou with the Battle of the Mines and her husband Joe. There's just a lot of people that step up in their own way and pick some. One thing I'd say is focus is very important. We've not been very focused. We kind of scatter and do all sorts of things.
Speak for yourself.
And, well, you're focused on the job, but it's easy to do, but people don't view themselves that way.
And so what I'm hearing that's really important is if we really want a vibrant place, anybody wants a vibrant place. I mean, I was just in Tampa last night with the mayor of Tampa, who's really quite extraordinary, who has that vision. If you have a government that has a strong vision and works together, so they do certain things, and then you have individuals who have a lot of vision and are willing to work and contribute. I mean, the city you can have then is
amazing.
Amazing.
If the city has a vision, it can then galvanize individuals to tee off and do some things. I think Tampa, with their Tampa Sports Authority, whether we agree or disagree on stadiums doesn't matter. They got the Raymond James Stadium, they got Legends Field, they got the Tampa Bay Times Forum now. when there's a vision and there's a will to come together, amazing things can happen. I mean, we have a modicum of that here, and we don't need, Tampa wants to be us. We don't need to be Tampa. And yeah, that's about the way that goes there. So
that's true, because what they're doing, one of the things I did was I went to a revision Tampa, and they're sort of becoming a river city. That's the whole thing. They're becoming a river city. And I thought, well, we already are a water city.
Absolutely. But there's a big difference. I wish that our city and county would invest more in some of the very exciting things that are going on here in the way that Tampa does. An example would be the Children's Museum, just because we're familiar with it. The city and the county put significant money into the Glazer Children's Museum, which I think is great. The cities put virtually nothing into Great Explorations. We pay rent at that location. So, and you look at social services funding. Well, I'll give you a sense of it. The budget at the Free Clinic, and we provide food and medical care and housing for homeless folks. And I could talk all you wanted about all the different programs that we have, but we meet basic needs. Our entire budget is about $4.5 million. Of that, about $100,000 comes from the county and the city.
And when we
of
spoke,
$4.5 million.
When we spoke the other day, we figured out that it meant the county and the city gave $1 per person that you serve.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. That's about right.
I mean, that isn't very bad.
And we are not alone in that. That's not a Free Clinic only comment. That you could say that about a significant number of organizations that do wonderful things for people and live out being a caring community, which is part of a community I want to live in.
So how does the group of people that the Free Clinic serve, how do they help to shape the city?
Gosh, I guess my perspective is for most of the folks that we serve, they're just trying to make it day to day.
But that clearly has an impact on the city.
It does. It's easier to talk about what the city's response has been, and the city's response has been, just as Clearwater's more recently has been, we really don't want to see it. And I really do appreciate not wanting to have somebody aggressively panhandle to me if I'm coming in and out of a store or restaurant. I really do get that. But at the same time, there is a little out of sight, out of mind. And so basically we've said, no, homeless people ought to be someplace in Mid-County at either Pinellas Hope or Safe Harbor. And in different ways, each of those places meet huge needs. And so I don't mean to be negative about them, but for those of us in St. Petersburg, whether we're downtown or someplace else, and those in Clearwater or other places in the county, still need to remember that if we do have a home to go to tonight, if we do know where our next meal's coming from, if we do know that we can access medical care, that we're privileged. And I believe we all have a responsibility to reach out and help somebody. None of us can fix all of those problems all at once, but there are some wonderful organizations in the county, and we're talking St. Pete in particular, who do tremendous work, whether it's the very large organizations like an All Children's or a much smaller grassroots organization like the Free Clinic, that every day take care of people one at a time. And All Children's is a good example of it's the place you would want to have your child or your grandchild cared for if you had the money to go anywhere, but it's also the place that will provide that compassionate, competent care for someone who has nothing in the same way.
So this is what I think I mean when you talk about all children's that is able to serve the whole continuum, that creates a certain identity, a certain environment where an ethic, so to speak, of the place. I think that there's a similar thing for a city, for a place, that those things can create an environment, an ethic. So, and that's why I think that it's really important to think about people who don't have a voice and what their role is in shaping our environment, shaping the ethic of the place we live in. And so when you speak about, we, in a sense, ship the homeless out, that says something about the place we live in, even though, it's providing a great service. But I think that's an issue that we don't usually talk about in this. I mean, we haven't yet talked about it in our town in this series, and I think that that's really important. And I think that talking also about how government, what responsibility does government have to people who don't have that voice, who are really in need?
Well, I'll give you an example. Let me just give one example where in a way, the government, public-private partnership is working. Sheriff Jim Coates worked together with several civic leaders and some mayors to come up with the Pinellas Safe Harbor situation there. They built this huge jail and medical facility that all of a sudden they had less criminals being booked and jailed, so they said, we have this building, what do we do with it? That was a creative solution to at least prime the pump. Catholic Charities, Frank Murphy, stepped up when they came up, I don't even remember the genesis of it, but the concept of Pinellas Hope. If any of you have been to Pinellas Hope, it's an interesting place. When you get there, it's kind of jarring in a way. They have these casitas, these little wooden structures, and then they have the tents. But that was an idea to get something going, that government primed the pump. Government showed some leadership to trigger it, but then government said, we don't have the funding for all this, we'll contribute, but due to things like the private funding of Catholic Charities, certain other agencies that have given money, it's a stopgap solution. It's probably not even a solution, stopgap handling of the issue. But that can happen where a good government vision can get something started. And then bluntly, it's going to take people like Beth, the boards of trustees and directors of the organizations all over this community that are going to have to take that lead and say, at least for now, until finances governmentally get better, are going to have to figure out how to do that.
Well, one example, though, I'd give of where we stand in the state on some of these issues is, if I recall, Pinellas County is the largest county in the state that provides, that has no real health plan, like a Tampa General, or doesn't have a public hospital that is open to everybody. If you look at the hospital charity care that is provided in all of Pinellas County, it's provided at the cost for mostly Bayfront Medical Center, All Children's, Morton Plant, St. Anthony's. There's not a governmental role in that. So we've got organizations that have stepped up and that have done that. There are still a lot of gaps in our community, and there are governmental sources that are used in Hillsborough County, for instance, in Broward County and Dade County, but not in Pinellas County.
No, I got to bring this up because you asked how does government affect certain things. Healthcare in this community. Bayfront Medical Center is the poster child for how government can muck up the health of a community, and I'll explain. Bayfront joined Baycare, which bluntly at the time was its saving grace. Without the joint buying, the group buying capability of that group, Bayfront's in trouble. Because of a certain politician on city council, the Baycare, which is Catholic or religiously affiliated, did not want to allow abortion funding at Bayfront Medical Hospital, which I think they probably did 3 a year. If that, it wasn't even an issue. But because of the political philosophy of, nope, if that's the way it's going to be, we're not going to let you be because it's on city-owned land that I think the rent is $1 a year.
Well, part of it is on city.
Well, whatever the lease is with the city, and the city had the right to veto it. One politician, a city council person, that anyone in this room can run for city council. So you think, what a little dowdy position. You get paid 38 grand a year. All in favor, aye, nay. A city council person changed the face negatively for Bayfront Medical Center, whose future is definitely very clouded and at risk. So there's a case where the right leadership and Bayfront might be thriving today, but as it is right now, they don't have a partner.
About the issue of the government funding social services, I mean, this is a big issue. So how would you argue that government should be involved in that, or maybe government shouldn't be involved? And both of you are in a position to speak about that. So how do you think about that?
I think about it in a similar way to the way I think about government's involvement in the arts. And those are two very different things, but both of them are part of the fabric of the community. Are we a caring community? Are we a creative community? And are we a safe community relative to policing? I mean, there are a lot of things we want our community to be, and I would say one of them is that we want to be a caring community, or I want to live in a caring community, and part of that is expressed through our government. And and as I've said, as a community, whether St. Petersburg or Pinellas County, we're at the low end of spending on social service.
Well, the argument for the arts is that the arts are an economic engine. I mean, they really create a lot of money for our community. But someone would argue that, well, the things that social services do, they really contribute to the economy, or do they just take away? So how do you respond to that sort of argument?
I mean, I could play around with arguments about why it's much more helpful for a woman to be at our women's residence and gain skills and be able to be back in the economy and working and independent. And I believe that, and I think that's true. But fundamentally, I just believe it's right. Government is there for a whole lot of reasons, but part of that is that there are things you can do on a very small scale in your neighborhood. There are things you can do on a larger scale as a city, other things that you need to do on a national level. Well, one of the things that if we are a caring community, that I think government does have a role in making this a good place to live for everybody, not just those who can afford to live in the best places and can afford to have food and medical care, but that we do care about our brothers and sisters.
The political debate that's being framed in this presidential election has deteriorated to the point of big government bad, small government better, no government the best. The framing of it is absolutely absurd, and I'll just say this very briefly. To me, the federal spending level, where we send billions of dollars and bodies to unwinnable police actions with no mission, no goal, no nothing, that's where the real money starts to go out. When you look at the local level, $100 grand in funding through taxes can do so much for social service activities. And then the economic engine thing, if Bill Huff was at Studio 620 when we had one of the earlier debates, and he challenged it. Well, I think that government should give, I think I said, if I'm mayor, I want the arts to get $1 million from various local government entities. How naive I was. And Bill Huff said, why not $2 million? And I said, well, Bill, basically, no, you'll never be satisfied. Whatever I say, you want to double it. The issue was, the point was well taken, that it is appropriate for the government to fund arts. It is an economic driver. The problem is with the debate is people don't want to see cause and effect. They don't want to see that if you invest in arts, therefore you'll attract a certain population level that will buy homes, meals, things like that. The problem also is the debate politically is being framed as a class warfare issue, which is just devastating to the social fabric. It's completely wrong. because we need both. There's going to be people that need help, and there's going to be people that prime that pump. You know, there's all these beach drive condos pump a lot of activity into the economy. They're not bad. So people have to frame things at a more realistic, I'd say, results-based level. So until, unfortunately, the budgets get stronger and better, the debate really isn't going to happen. There is no money for arts and for things. So we need political leadership next time for people to run that will keep that in mind, and when the time is ready to say, hey, we need to do this for the arts. Beyond that, thank God for John Galbraith, Gus Stavros, Bill Huff, Bill
Al May.
Edwards, Al May. You know, without these people are willing to take funds that they have earned through hard work and risk-taking and give it back to the community, we've got a problem. One thing that Beth and I are working on now, partly in how we recruit board members for organizations and things, we need that next generation of givers, because we're not going to be able to rely on the government for it. And unfortunately, a lot of the larger corporations we have, they're not as inclined to be involved. I mean, Al, and especially Bill Huff, Stavros, James, Tom James, they got involved with the organization. It wasn't just, here's a check. It's they lent leadership. They lent, Dick and Sandy Everett, Dick's involved with, and Sandy with Raymond James for a long time, served on boards, served on advisory committees. It takes more than just the check. So we need people to do all that.
So why do you think that there is this brand hatred for the government? I mean, in this discussion tonight, I mean, it really seems that if you have government that has a vision and really works together, it's such an asset to our lives and what can happen. And then partnering with the private sector, I mean, one can, just imagine what can happen. So why is there such hatred for the government?
I don't hate government.
Well, we know you don't.
I tried to get a job and they rejected me. But it's very easy to say it's Tea Party Republicans that are just blasting all left and right. Well, I'm just saying, but this hatred,
right.
like I'll tell you, I don't hate government because I respect that it can do some things that private parties can't do. But the problem is the inefficient use of funds that government embodies. Trust is everything. And what is so bothersome is, I know how Beth runs the Free Clinic's finances. I know American Stage, Great Explorations, other things. We squeeze a $100 line item gets scrutiny. When you, at the federal level, I think the hatred is the federal and the state level, where you see the abuses, you see these just telephone book numbers. $1 billion, now trillion has entered the vernacular. The waste is so bad and the incompetence is so bad, at least it's viewed that way. I'll say there's two cures for it. One is cut out all the fraud and the crap that they do. The second thing is have people that can communicate the things the government does well. St. Pete does not communicate well. The school board of Pinellas County, which, by the way, you desperately need to back that referendum on re-upping the millage for funding teacher salaries. $3 grand per teacher is paid by us voluntarily, which is coming up for vote, and it's going to get buried in the amendments on the ballot. Vote for it. My point there is they're hiring more communication specialists at the Pinellas County School Board to communicate. And everything is so muddied there, they just need one or two people that know how to state their case and present it. Communication is awful.
Completely agree with you. One of the key things is communication. If people could very honestly and clearly say what was going on, I think people would definitely back them. So why don't we open it up for questions? So who has a question for Scott and Beth? Yes, could you stand up and say your name?
I'm John Hart, and in the paper, Scott and Beth, in the past issues, there's been so much talk about the pier and about paywall and about the raise. And I know you'd have to almost have another forum to cover an answer to that, but I would sort of like to know how you feel the direction is going on those two things.
You want to take that one?
Nice try. You're the letter writer to the Tampa Bay Times.
All right, and preface by, if I was mayor, what would I do? The pier.
You asked.
Well, I'm on record of a couple of things. Number one, the whole process needs to slow down, in my opinion. They should gut the pier. By the way, I've been all over it. It is not redeemable. You cannot reconstruct it for a reasonable amount of dollars. I'm speaking kind of forcefully here, but I believe that. Tear it all out.
Well, he's not mayor, so he can say what he wants.
Empty it out. There's no reporters in here, is there? No?
Doesn't matter.
Anyway, tear it out, clean it all out, make it a place where people can go, make it a piece of sculpture until you've vetted all the alternatives as to what you need to do. We live on a beachfront condo. We're going to be looking over this. I'm kind of excited about the lens on a personal side. Will it get rid of the subsidy? Will it fix the problems that they've been talking about? No. It's going to be an interesting sculpture, and everything is a big guess. I mean, we're going to try it. The unintended consequence, we don't. So Pier, that train is moving. My friends Bill Ballard, Bud Risser, they're trying to stop it through a process. Then Kathleen Ford's going to sue their pants off and all this out of the city. I don't know. But so the Pier, bluntly in the long run, the Pier is a gnat on our tail. It's not a huge issue. 50 to 100 million over 30, 40, 50 years is not going to be a big deal. But they need to do something, and they're going to do it. What was the name? The Rays? The Baywalk Rays. Baywalk, fait accompli. Bill Edwards is going to dump a ton of ridiculous money into it, about 30 to 35 million. I'm friends with Joe Jimenez, who's his right hand. It is going to be stunning. It's going to look great, and it is the biggest Las Vegas gamble that you'll ever see. Will high-end restaurants, Zakarian, Maramoto, possibly Emerald, and all, is that going to play here? And I know how Beth and I eat, and sometimes it's a $6.99 flatbread at Bella Brava. It's not going to be a $50 steak at some of these places. So it's going to happen. I'm excited for Bill Edwards' impact in this community. It's just, there is no hidden agenda. He's not going to make a nickel on that. His child may be on sale. The parking garage, all these supposed giveaways that you read, it's got to happen. Raise. I'll say it in this, some of my clutch hitter friends are not here, but I always like to muckrake on this one. I think, and I'm friends with the Rays, I'm friends with the politicians that love the Rays, and I'm friends with the people that hate the whole situation and the billionaire giveaways. The scenario I think that's going to happen is it's going to go to stalemate. Ultimately, a group's going to be put together that's going to put together a land deal in Tampa. There's going to be some heavy lobbying for that to happen, and my view is a little different. If I was mayor, I would quietly and without earshot negotiate a deal where the city of St. Pete gets paid a sufficient amount of money to pay off all indebtedness, all depending on the year, all money's 50 million, 60, I don't know, where they get out of their deal, let them build their stadium in Tampa. Will I go to as many games as the few games I go to because I have a big TV? Probably not. But here's the issue. My opinion is baseball is a very iffy proposition in Tampa Bay. The Bucks are now showing it's tough, and it's not just the economy. It's an endemic thing in this area. There's no historic legacy with sports in here. So here's the trick. Who gets stuck holding the tab? I use this analogy. If I gave you a 100-foot yacht right now, would you thank me for that gift? You probably would. And then the reality of having to insure it, dock it, screw it, and all, it's bankruptcy is what happens. We've been given the raise, and it's not going to work. I think that Sternberg and his group would find the funds if that door was open. I don't think it's devastating to St. Pete. I think St. Pete's going to do just fine if we have a baseball team in the community. What happens, Craig Scher is a good friend of Beth's and mine, what happens when you have that acreage open up in 20 years, not 5 or 10, that whole Tropicana field zone is going to be marvelous, and private developers will do it for you. We don't have to pay that money. So the answer and pay property taxes on it. So my conclusion there is the Rays have a shot at succeeding in Tampa. I think it's a small shot. I would rather Tampa, here's where I'm being nasty, let Tampa foot the bill and Hillsborough County for that disaster. Watch Miami. Watch the Miami Marlins Stadium when that all of a sudden goes to 5,000 people attending and they have to pay these salaries. It's going to be devastating. So that's my answer on that.
They liked one of your answers, but you just don't know which one.
Marrying you.
Oh.
Who else has a question?
They're afraid of my answers.
No one?
Yes. Could you stand up and say who you are, please?
I'm Jane Roberts, and I've lived downtown for 30 years now and love it. make such an interesting point in the inability of the city council and the mayor to have a common path or goal. Is there any way that that can be anticipated at time of election? Is there any way you have a clue whether the various candidates are thinking the same way that we are listening to promises from the guy who's running for mayor?
Thank you. Very nice question.
That's a good question. That's a hard question.
Beth, do you have something to say to this?
I'll give it a shot. I tend to want to look more at the quality and qualities of the person and their willingness to think through issues, to work with other people on issues, to study things that maybe aren't even anticipated at the time of an election. Then I do litmus tests on, will they vote this way or that way on a specific thing. But I think I'm a minority. It seems to me, whether it's national politics or local, we tend to be one issue people or one or two issues, and we say, well, so what will you do about this? And I'm not sure we get the best people that way. We just get the folks who line up with whatever we think is the right answer on a given issue. So I'd look at the people and, going to the forums and listening to folks. There are a lot of opportunities to see folks in action. Now, anybody in the crowd who's tried to hire somebody knows that you don't always get it right. So I'm not saying that just because you go to the forums and you pay a lot of attention, you're always going to get it right, or that somebody's going to act once they're in office in the way that you anticipated. But I would look to quality and qualities as opposed to positions.
It's interesting that this talk about vision and what you've just said, people never ask, what is your big vision? People ask, well, what do you think about the fire? What do you think about
Parking meters.
or parking meters?
Yeah.
We tend to ask those specific things, which we really want to know, but we don't tend to ask that big question. And maybe we have to start asking that question. What is your big vision for the city? And how would you implement it? And see how they present themselves. I have to say, going to those mayor forums was really instructive.
I will mention a couple things that I think is kind of appropriate. It goes to how we fund things and our expectations. Something happens to people once they're elected. You start to like getting reporters calling you and people bluntly treating you differently than before you were elected. And you tend to begin to think you're kind of important. Whether that's true or not, that remains to be seen. What I would say is we need to do two things. And I'm going to use the superintendency of the Pinellas County school systems as an example. We have to get away from this class warfare thing and the understanding of what people get paid. City councilmen get paid $38 grand a year. You can't make a living doing that, so you have to have another job. Here's the joke in Pinellas County. St. Pete city councilmen work their butts off. There are so many committees and organizations they have to go to. It's basically full-time work for part-time pay. County commissioners concurrently get $90,000 per year for very little work. It's part-time work for full-time pay. One issue is you're going to have to pay more, bluntly. I mean, everyone can't be wealthy that's running for these things. You either get people that are very underqualified, or they're just not going to run. With the superintendent of Pinellas County Schools, I just got to mention this one thing. If you want to do one thing to strengthen education in this community, someone, and I don't think it's going to happen, but if I was on school board, I'd try to push it and probably would lose election the next time, is we'll pay a CEO of a large organization $1 million, $2 million a year. We pay a superintendent between $225 and $275 per year, which is basically middle management in most reasonable sized organizations now. Pay the guy they bring in $400,000 to $500,000. You'll attract a pool of people that are unbelievably qualified. But the problem is, everyone is very apologetic. It's almost a crime to pay too much. Beth and I talk about this in the social service area there. And Lisa Negrini, who runs a private nonprofit that needs a lot of expertise. There's very few nonprofits in Pinellas County where someone gets paid $100 grand a year. Because for one thing, boards, donors, well, oh, you're inefficient with your pay, with your funds. How can you pay someone that much money? Well, if the person brings in $2 million a year in funding, then when you were getting $100,000 the year before, why not? There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal about the underfunding of leadership of nonprofits. And it is jarring when you see what you have to pay for top-notch talent. But you can go on to public record sites and see what the people at Raymond James get paid and look at their success, what Mindy Grossman of HSN gets paid, and look at what she's done. When you increase the market cap $1 billion, is that worth a couple million? Maybe. But private entities, no. And police chiefs, mayors, it's hard to do that and get the quality you need. It's something we have to look at in the future.
I just need to be real clear. I have 3 or 4 board members in the crowd that I was not lobbying there.
They know they got a bargain.
Yes, would you stand up and say your name, please?
I'm Gene Stern. And
we'll get you there.
I'm sorry, I thought you were pointing to me, I apologize.
Okay.
We're sitting in a venue that has been in the news a lot because of the Grand Prix. I love the Grand Prix. I know it costs the city a lot of money to put that on, but there's been a big conflict between the Dali closing up. Is there any resolution to that issue that we can see coming?
Is Hank back there, the director? No. I'm not in a position to answer that question. I believe that they are negotiating with the city to find a really good way to address that, because at least in the short run, the Grand Prix is not going to go away.
When the
Dali's not going to go away.
When the Dali was built, they knew what they were getting into. They're going to do a combined ticket. That's what I heard.
There are some ways to mitigate that, and again, it's working together to try to come up with a better, not a perfect, but a better solution.
And over the years, they've been working better together to do that. It's an important issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm Michael Sharples, and my wife and I moved here from Siesta Key about 3 years ago, so we totally endorse what Scott said. We love living in downtown St. Petersburg. It's everything we hoped for. And we like boating up and down the Gulf Coast. And so there are many gems on each side of this peninsula. But to be honest, we're totally dismayed at what's in between. It's taken a long time to explore it and try and figure it out. And we went around Tyrone Square many times before we sort of figured out what that was all about. Is there a body of people who are thinking of us as a peninsula, as a Pinellas County, and has a larger vision for how this whole area should come together or work as a larger community?
Welcome to the Balkans, Mike. We have a lot, I think something like 17 municipalities, 16 or 17 fire departments. Pinellas, which was spun off from Hillsborough County, not in a very friendly way many years ago, has never really developed a sense of unanimity in what goes on. If anything, there's a real divide between downtown St. Pete and west of US 19. Running for mayor, I just loved it. I learned so much about that. By the way, I will mention one little plug for a lot of things. There's Pinellas Citizens University that's free, that you can go to and learn tons. There's Leadership St. Pete. There's a lot of groups you can join and learn about this whole area. So the answer is, unfortunately, west of US 19, I guess I think you're alluding to how the neighborhoods just sort of are different. There's not much vibrancy once you get past a certain place going west. There's not a real good answer to that at this point until the housing stock reaches a certain age and some developers come in and decide they want to buy up entire things and build newer things. There's been no vision, and there is certainly no cooperation between the political bodies. You want to have fun, go to the beach communities and see how well those, Reddington, Indian Shores, St. Pete Beach, how Madeira, how they just are dysfunctional. Not a good answer. Stay downtown with us.
Yeah, I think that the sad answer is that we don't have an answer to that, that we can't say that there's a single force or body that's trying to vision for the entire county. Um, a lot of it is caused because we have all these municipalities, and so we don't have a center. And you couldn't pay me enough to live in Tampa and not in St. Pete. I love being in St. Petersburg. But one thing I'm envious of is the fact that they've got, what, 3 municipalities and then the county, and it's just easier to make things happen there. And that would be nice if it were easier to make things happen on a more consolidated basis.
It's also not only Pinellas, it is Hillsborough with Tampa, and the sense that we are one community. Mm-hmm. And I see that happening more. People are talking a bit about it, but there's still that, Tampa's here and St. Pete and Clearwater and the rest of Pinellas, but we really are a large community where there's resources that each different community has, and if there were some way really to bring that together and be one large metropolitan area, which we're no doubt going to be, the richness would be incredible. There's a question. Yes, would you stand up, please?
Hi, Joy Rickety. We've lived here about 5 years, and I think I'm relatively new to the community. And I see that St. Petersburg, we're the #1 cultural destination for a mid-sized city, and there's a very strong philanthropic kind of group who support the arts. But as we age out, myself included, I don't see, most of the big givers and the big activists, we're all getting older. And so how do you get that new, younger people to be part of it when the public school system here is relatively weak? And you see, for instance, like you'll see something in the paper when everything happened with the superintendent, and then it kind of just dies off. You see a couple of articles where it says 1 out of 4 African Americans in Pinellas County males graduate from high school. Doesn't seem, I keep hearing about Midtown, but there doesn't seem to be either a political will or some reason to develop Midtown. So how do you get the leaders of the next generation and attract kind of younger people to come here, like a Silicon Valley kind of group of people with money and want it, if you're going to, I don't know, what's the answer to that?
You asked a lot of different questions, I think, too.
So many questions.
The piece that I'll speak to, I guess, is the next generation of leaders. We're in our late 50s. So, and we've talked about these philanthropists and great leaders who are now in their 60s, 70s, or 80s. How did we get involved? Is the next generation from that generation is people asked us. We were prone to want to be involved, but somebody asked us. I think it's incumbent upon people like Scott and me that in the boards that we're involved with, we reach out to people of promise, to the young professionals and to others who may now not be able to give huge amounts of money, but they can give meaningfully for them, and they have talents and time to do a variety of things, because ultimately when we give, it's usually because, and those who give in large amounts, or large amounts for them, because we have a sense of ownership for a museum or a sense of ownership about a hospital. It's us. It's not giving to somebody else. And that usually takes time. It may be by volunteering. It may be serving on a board. It may be some kind of continuous interaction with those organizations. So I see a lot of very promising young people in their early 30s. And what I know about the millennials is they are seeking meaning, and in fact, they've come up through schools, high schools and colleges in many cases, that required volunteerism and required community involvement far greater than was true for most of us. So, I'm fairly hopeful about that, but it does take some intentionality on the part of all nonprofits, for instance, to not just seek out people for service who are currently able to do a lot for us, but also to build the next generations of leaders.
A couple things briefly. Americans give 2% of GDP to charitable nonprofit organizations. The next highest amount country is the United Kingdom at 1% GDP. We're doubly as philanthropic. People that earn over 100 grand, virtually 100% give to charity. Under 100 grand, 65% give to. We're a charitable country. But I think it's incumbent upon, when I see Lisa with Great X, Lisa and I are working together to restructure the board and bring in some dynamic young people, and boy, are we hitting it. That board is just going to be on fire over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And boards have to replenish that. On the contrary, you have to respect the experience and the skills of others. As Al May's here, we've asked Al, Susan Huff, and Marianne Ballard to come back and help us out at American Stage over some rough edges. So if you have both, then you're going to be in good shape. But leading by example. I didn't know until I married Beth, and she showed me the way that it's fun to raise money for nonprofits and give money away. I had a couple Corvettes, and then I sort of realized I kept them for a couple of years and sold them because I never drove them.
It's a lot more fun to give it to charity.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about it, and just in my makeup, and I know a lot of guys that have sharp cars and have fancy boats and stuff, and then when you get to the heart of it, they wind up not using it a whole lot. Some do, and once you're over that, you say, what gets to your core, which one? We need to teach people that it's fun to help other people, not necessarily have your name on a building, but that's a lot of fun. It's watching young people develop and do that and become charitable is just something that can be really, really wonderful. I had something else, but that was.
Did you want to talk about Midtown or some of the other?
And
the school system?
Question is the school system.
Well, I have to say that the because the museum closes in 4 minutes.
So unless we want to sleep here.
Sure, that Scott will go longer than 4 minutes. So,
It'd be free shopping day.
We need to thank Scott Wagman and Beth Houghton for being here today and for
Thank you. Appreciate it. We never have anything to say.